Isang lalaki sa Russia ang nahagip at nakaladkad ng umaandar na tren.
Patuloy na pong inaalam ng mga otoridad ang kalagayan ng lalaki. Ang mga susunod na detalye aming ibabahagi maya-maya. Magandang gabi. Ako po si Ricky Mathay.
Ako si Nina Richie Alago Flores. Ito ang mata ng Agila International. Para naman sa mga headlines ngayong araw ng Miyerkules.
Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. idiniin na obligasyon ng Pilipinas na tumulong sa Interpol hinggil sa pagkakaaresto kay former President Rodrigo Duterte.
Pamilya Duterte ang nagpasaklolo sa Korte Suprema. Ubra kaya ang habeas corpus? Detalye ating alamin.
20 patay sa pagsalakay ng rebeldeng grupo sa isang tren sa Pakistan.
Ukraine pumayag na sa 30-day ceasefire nila ng Russia.
At controversial US streamer Johnny Somali nahaharap sa 5-year imprisonment sa South Korea. Binigyan diin ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. na obligasyon ng Pilipinas na tumugon sa International Criminal Police Organization o Interpol. Obligasyon din anya ng Pilipinas na i-enforce ang arrest warrant na inilabas ng Interpol.
Nilinaw naman ni Marcos na walang halong politika sa pagsuko ng gobyerno kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte sa International Criminal Court o ICC at hindi rin anya ito labag sa soberanya ng bansa.
No. Bakit naman? Dahil consistent naman tayo. Hindi tayo tumutulong sa investigasyon ng ICC. Wala tayong meron tayong contact sa kanila, natural. Pero no, not on an official level. We didn't help them in any way. The arrest the arrest that we did today was in compliance with our commitments to Interpol. It just so happened that that came from ICC. But it's not because it came from ICC, it's because it came from Interpol.
Iginit naman ng Pangulo na hindi political persecution sa former president na naaresto siya, tulad ng ibinibintang ng mga taga-suporta ng mga Duterte. Nanindigan din si Pangulong Marcos Jr. na walang nilabag na batas ang gobyerno sa pagkakaaresto ng dating Pangulo, kundi sumunod lamang sila sa lahat ng proseso ukol dito.
It's very simple. It's a request to the Philippine government from Interpol to enforce the arrest warrant. And of course, we comply with our commitments to Interpol. We did not do this because it was derived from or it came from ICC. We did this because Interpol asked us to do it. And we have commitments to them, and we lived up to those commitments.
Samantala, naka-heightened alert ngayon ng Philippine National Police o PNP sa buong Pilipinas matapos maaresto si dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte at lalo na nang inilipad na siya patungo sa The Hague sa The Netherlands. Inaasahan po kasi ng pambansang pulisya ang mga rally at protesta ng mga taga-suporta ng dating Pangulo kasunod ng mga pangyayari. Nagpadala na ang PNP ng memorandum sa lahat ng police regional offices at national support systems. Kasama na ang Special Action Force ukol dito. Inatasan ng PNP ang lahat ng kanilang uniformed personnel na magsagawa ng masusing pagbabantay sa seguridad ng publiko mula sa gawain ng masasamang loob. Sinilbihan na ng warrant of arrest na inilabas ng International Criminal Court o ICC ang dating Pangulong Duterte sa NAIA Terminal 3 matapos itong dumating sa Pilipinas mula sa Hong Kong. Kinasuhan ang dating Pangulo ng Crimes Against Humanity dahil sa umano'y extrajudicial killing sa war on drugs ng dating administrasyon.
Inaasahan naman na maglalabas pa ng ibang warrant of arrest ng International Criminal Court o ICC laban sa mga co-perpetrators daw ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte kaugnay ng umano'y judicial o extrajudicial killings sa ilalim ng war on drugs ng kanyang administrasyon. Paliwanag ni Attorney Joel Butuyan, abogado ng EJK victims, kung babasahin ang warrant of arrest ay may indikasyon na may iba pang ipaaaresto. Sinabi ni Butuyan kabilang sa listahan ng ICC na maaaring isa si Senador Ronald Bato de la Rosa bilang co-perpetrators na aarestuhin. Dagdag pa ni Butuyan na maraming testigong Pilipino ang inaasang tutungo sa ICC para tumestigo laban kay Duterte. Bubuin din niyang isang Victims Council para kumatawan sa mga pamilya ng mga napatay sa drug war. Si De La Rosa ay nagsilbi bilang hepe ng Philippine National Police o PNP sa ilalim ng Duterte administration.
Hinimok ng China ang International Criminal Court o ICC na iwasan ang pamumulitika. Kasunod po yan ng pagkakaaresto kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Sinabi ni Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning na mahigpit nilang minomonitor ang sitwasyon.
这是一个重要的突发事件，中方注意到有关消息，并正在密切关注事态发展。我想重申，中国一贯主张国际刑事法院应严格遵循补充性管辖原则，依法审慎行使职权，避免政治化和双重标准。
Lumipad patungo sa The Netherlands si Vice President Sara Duterte para tulungan ang kanyang ama na si dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte sa kanyang pagharap sa International Criminal Court o ICC sa The Hague. Kinumpirma ng Office of the Vice President na kaalis si VP Sara ng Pilipinas dakong alas 7:40 ng umaga patungong Amsterdam. Bukod sa pangalawang Pangulo ay humingi rin ng travel clearance sa Kamara si Davao 1st District Representative Paulo Duterte para makabiyahe sa Japan at the Netherlands. Inaprubahan naman ni House Secretary General Reginald Velasco ang kahilingan ng mambabatas. Kagabi, isinakay si dating Pangulong Duterte sa isang Learjet sa Villamor Air Base patungong Dubai. Inaasahan na mula sa Dubai ay ililipad patungong Rotterdam sa The Hague Airport si FPRRD ngayong araw.
Sinabi ng Malacanang na hindi pa babayaan ng gobyerno si dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte sa kinakaharap nitong mga kaso sa International Criminal Court o ICC. Tiniyak ni Presidential Communications Office Undersecretary Claire Castro na makatatanggap ng legal assistance ang dating Pangulo mula sa gobyerno kung kinakailangan. Subalit, wala pa niya silang impormasyon kung mayroon na bang galing sa kampo ni Duterte na lumapit sa Malacanang upang humingi ng tulong. Nilinaw din ni Castro na may kasama abogado si Duterte nang isakay ito sa eroplano at dalhin sa The Hague.
But anyway, meron man po tayong batasang RA 9851 kung saan sinasabi po, no, kahit po ang dating Pangulong Duterte ay masasabi pong dapat na usigin o kailangan magkaroon ng hearing sa ICC, hindi naman din po papabayaan ng ating gobyerno, lalong-lalo na po kung ito ay tungkol sa kanyang karapatan.
Kaugnay nito, ipinaliwanag ng dalawang ICC judges na walang jurisdiksyon ang ICC sa pagdinig sa umano'y crimes against humanity ng dating Pangulo. Kung bakit? Nanindigan po kasi sina Judge Mark Perin de Brinchambod at Judge Gotcha Lourdes Kipanids ng Appeals Chamber ng ICC na hindi na state party ng Pilipinas sa ilalim ng Rome Statute. Sa dissenting opinion ng dalawang judges noong July 18, 2023, iginiit nilang dapat binawi ng pre-trial chamber ang ibinigay ng authorization sa mga prosecutors na magsagawa ng investigasyon ukol kay Duterte. At sinabi rin nilang dapat ay itinigil na ang mga ginagawang proceedings. Counterproductive rin nila at pagsasayang ng resources ng korte na payagan pa ipagpatuloy ang investigasyon na sa dulo ng paglilitis kapag hinamon ang partikular na kaso ay mapag-aalaman na walang jurisdiksyon ang korte. Naging mahigpit ang botohan ukol sa jurisdiction issue para sa pagdinig ng kaso ni Duterte dahil 3 judges ang bumoto ng pabor na may jurisdiksyon ng ICC habang 2 judges naman ang tumutol.
Kasunod ng pag-alis ni Vice President Sara Duterte upang puntahan ang kanyang ama na si dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte sa The Hague sa The Netherlands ay pinalitan nito ang profile photo ng kanyang Facebook page na may red ribbon at may nakasulat na Bring PRRD Home. Ang bagong profile photo ng bise ay may signature fist sign din ni dating Pangulo. Haharap si Duterte sa International Criminal Court o ICC para sa kasong crimes against humanity dahil sa umano'y extrajudicial killings noong administrasyon nito. Samantala, nakaschedule na dumalo si VP Sara sa mga aktibidad sa Davao pero nagpahayag ito na hindi na makararating. Pero binigyan diin niya na hindi politika ang pinagtutuunan niya ng pansin sa ngayon, anya nais lamang niyang makahanap ng paraan upang maibalik sa bansa ang dating Pangulo. Kaugnay nito, naghain ang magkahiwalay na petition for writ of habeas corpus sina Davao City Mayor Sebastian Baste Duterte at Veronica Kiri Duterte sa Korte Suprema. Naunang dumulog sa Korte Suprema si Mayor Baste sa oras na alas 9:16 ng umaga, habang bandang alas 10:26 ng umaga naman naghain ang kanyang petisyon si Kitty. Respondent sa 2 petisyon ng mga Duterte sina Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin, Justice Secretary Crispin Remulla, PNP Chief Romel Marbil at PNP CIDG Chief Nicolas Torre III. Parehong hinihiling ng 2 anak ni dating Pangulong Duterte sa korte na mag-issue ito ng writ of habeas corpus upang agad na dalhin at iharap ng mga respondents ang kanilang ama sa Korte Suprema. Kinwestiyon naman ni Attorney Salvador Panelo at anak nito na si Attorney Salvador Paulo Panelo Jr. ang anilay illegal na detention, pagdukot at pagsuko sa dating Pangulo sa ICC.
Problema na ng gobyerno yon sapagkat sila ang gumawa ng illegal na akto, i-correct nila ang sarili nila. Kaya nga nag-file kami ng habeas corpus para mabigyan ng pagkakataon ng Korte Suprema na pumasok at makialam sa ginawang pakikialam sa karapatang pangtao ng petitioner, anak, tatay ng petition. But not at this time. We were barred, the lawyers were barred entry. The petitioner's father was deprived of legal representation. Hindi lang yan. Can you imagine? Ang isang senador at vice-presidente hindi makapasok para bisitahin ang kanilang kamag-anak at mas matindi pa ito sa martial law. This is dictatorship. It's even worse than the father's dictatorship. At least nung mga panahon ni Marcos Sr., merong semblance of rule of law, may due process. Ito wala eh.
Sinabi rin ni Attorney Panelo na isang impeachable ground ang ginawang pagpapasuko kay dating Pangulong Duterte sa ICC dahil wala naman anyang jurisdiksyon ng ICC sa Pilipinas.
Sabi, sinuko mo yung iyong kasarilan. You surrendered your sovereignty. And under the Constitution, the prime duty of the President and the government is to serve and to protect. Ano mang protection na ginawa mo, isinuko mo nga. That is even a culpable violation of the Constitution. And I dare say that that is an impeachable ground. Kaya lahat ng mga nag-aresto at nag-utos ng pag-aresto ng illegal sa dating Presidente Duterte ay criminally liable.
Para naman kay retired Associate Justice Antonio Carpio ng Supreme Court, moot and academic na ang habeas corpus na inihain ng kampo ni Duterte. Wala naman daw kasing jurisdiction ng Supreme Court ng bansa sa ICC. Ngunit paliwanag ng ilang legal experts, may exceptions to the mootness doctrine na inihanay sa isang 2012 case. Dito ay nilinaw ng Korte Suprema na maaari pa ring magpasya ang Korte kahit moot and academic na ang isang kaso kung una, the case is capable of repetition yet evading review. Kung ang mga parehong sitwasyon ay maaaring maulit sa hinaharap, ang hukuman ay maaaring magtatag ng isang precedent upang maiwasan ang kawalan ng katiyakan o uncertainty sa kaso. Pangalawa, there is a paramount public interest involved. Ang mga kasong ito ay may kinalaman sa fundamental constitutional questions, sovereignty at international obligations. Pangatlo, the case raises a constitutional issue requiring authoritative interpretation. Maaring magdesisyon ng korte kung ang mga fundamental constitutional questions gaya ng legalidad ng ICC, cooperation post-withdrawal ay nangangailangan ng paglilinaw.
Samantala, handa po si Senador Ronald De La Rosa na sumuko sakaling lumabas na ang warrant of arrest ng International Criminal Court laban sa kanya. Mian Corvera para sa detalye ng balita.
Nilinaw ni Senador Ronald Bato de la Rosa na nananatili pa rin siya sa Pilipinas at hindi siya nagtatago matapos maaresto si dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Sa isang phone interview ngayong gabi, sinabi ni De La Rosa na hindi siya makontak mula pa kahapon dahil pinatay niya ang kanyang telepono dahil naging abala sa pagdraft ng petisyon na inihain nila sa Korte Suprema at dami ng mga taong tumatawag sa kanya. Ayon sa senador, wala siyang balak na magtago kahit pa may mga pahiwatig na isa siya sa mga posibleng sumunod na ipaaresto ng International Criminal Court. Katunayan, normal pa rin ang gagawin niyang pangampanya at pag-iikot at kung babalik na ang trabaho sa Senado, wala siyang balak na umabsent. Handa raw siyang sumuko kung mailalabas na warrant of arrest laban sa kanya.
Yeah, I talked to my wife already.
Ano sabi, sir?
I talked to my wife already and sabi ko, my decision is to submit myself if a warrant is being issued.
Hindi.
So, okay naman sila. So, okay naman sila. I can run. I can run. The Philippines is too wide for me to hide. I can run. And I can use some connections to hide. And napakalaki itong Pilipinas.
Pero pinag-aaralan niya rin na magpakupkop sa Senado kung nasa sesyon, depende sa magiging usapan nila ni Senate President Francis Escudero.
Kanya hanggat kaya ng Senate President na kupkupin niya muna ako, hindi niya muna ko isurrender kung may warrant of arrest na, pero session kami. Kasi I hope din na respetuhin din siya ng executive branch of government. Kasi mayroon naman yung mga gano'n na mga protocol, di ba?
Mian Corvera para sa Mata ng Agila, matatag, matapang, matapat.
Susunod, Ukraine pumayag na sa isang buwang ceasefire nila ng Russia.
Estados Unidos bibigyan muli ng suporta ang Ukraine.
At libu-libong mga Mexicano nagdiwang sa panalo ng Mexico sa tariff war. Detalye po ng mga balitang yan sa pagbabalik ng Mata ng Agila International.
This Sunday on Cine Throwback.
This is an incredible battle between these two great drivers.
2 days after his near-fatal accident, Niki Lauda will race here today.
This Sunday, 12 noon, here on NET25.
Let's net together, sa NET25.
Inatake ng mga armadong grupo sa Pakistan ang isang pampasaherong tren. Pinasabugan pa nila ang riles bago atakihin ang tren kung saan ipinagpipilitan nila na kanilang nasa kontrol dapat ang nasabing tren. Una rito ay pinagbabaril ng Baloch Liberation Army o BLA ang Jafar Express train na bumabiyahe mula Quetta patungong Peshawar Province. Ayon sa otoridad, ang layo ng Baloch Liberation Army ay ang kasarinlan ng Balochistan na maging isa itong autonomous region na hiwalay sa Pakistan at ang pagpapalayas ng mga Chino sa ginagawang railway sa lugar. Aabot naman sa 20 katao ang nasawi sa nasabing insidente at halos 500 pa ang kasalukuyang bihag ng naturang grupo. Patuloy na tinutugis ng mga otoridad ang mga rebeldeng grupo.
Nanghihinayang isang British climate envoy sa pag-alis ng Estados Unidos sa Paris Agreement. Subalit, dapat na anyang mag-move on ang buong mundo at gawin ng ibang bansa ang bahagi nito para labanan ang climate change. Jerry Season po para sa report.
Dapat ipagpatuloy ng buong mundo ang target nito na bawasan ng greenhouse gas emissions na nakabalangkas sa Paris Agreement kahit kumalas na sa kasunduan ng Estados Unidos. Yan ay ayon mismo kay British Climate Envoy Rachel Kite. Sinabi pa ni Kite na ginagawa ng United Kingdom ang bahagi nito na magbawas ng gas emissions. Ito anya ang siyang katunayan na epektibo nitong napapamahalaan ng pandaigdigang crisis sa klima.
The direction of travel is the same. The point on the horizon at which we must all arrive, right, which is reduced emissions and greater resilience to the impacts of climate change, that hasn't changed either. So it's regrettable that the United States is out. Maybe they'll come back in again as they did last time. I don't know, but we're moving ahead because our security depends upon it.
Giit ni Kite, hindi naman nagbago ang scientific consensus kahit na nga nag-pull out pa sa Paris Agreement ang US. Committed pa rin anya ang ibang mga bansa na labanan ang climate change. Binigyang linaw din ng opisyal ang pangamba ng ilang miyembro ng publiko sa alokasyon ng pangbansang pondo para sa UK defense system. Wala pa anyang desisyon na maglilipat ang budget mula sa green energy initiatives.
In the case of the UK, our energy security, our food security and the well-being of the British people is entirely linked to the ability of the international community to manage this climate crisis. That's the same for the South African government, it's the same for the Indian government, it's the same for the Chinese government. Around the world, people are noting that the US has pulled out of Paris, but we've got to carry on.
From London, United Kingdom, Jerry Season, for mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Sinabi ng bansa Ukraine na handang tumanggap ng agarang 30-day ceasefire, pati na rin ang Russia, batay sa panukala ng Estados Unidos.
І сьогодні в розмові була пропозиція саме американської сторони зробити перший крок одразу далі. І на 30 днів спробувати встановити повне припинення вогню. Не тільки щодо ракет, дронів і бомб, не тільки у Чорному морі, а також по всій лінії фронту. Україна сприймає цю пропозицію. Ми вважаємо це позитивним. Ми готові зробити такий крок. Американська сторона розуміє наші аргументи, сприймає наші пропозиції. І я хочу подякувати президенту Трампу за конструктивність розмови наших команд.
Nangyari ito isang araw matapos ang pag-uusap ng dalawang bansa na pinangunahan ng Saudi Arabia na dinaluhan naman ng delegasyon ni Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at delegasyon ng Estados Unidos na kinabibilangan ni United States Secretary Marco Rubio. Sabi ni Zelensky, nakadepende na sa US ang pagkumbinse sa Russia na pumayag sa positive proposal na kanilang napag-usapan. Ito ang unang official meeting sa pagitan ng dalawang bansa mula noong magkasagutan sa White House si Zelensky at US President Donald Trump. Paliwanag ni Trump, makikipag-usap rin siya kay Russian President Vladimir Putin at inaasahan niyang papayag din ng Moscow sa mga kondisyon na kanilang napagkasunduan.
Ukraine has agreed to it, and hopefully Russia will agree to it. We're going to meet with them later on today and tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to wipe out a deal. But I think the ceasefire is very important. If we can get Russia to do it, that'll be great. If we can't, we just keep going on and people are going to get killed, lots of people.
Ayon din sa joint statement ng dalawang bansa, nagkasundo ang parehong kampo na ipangalan ng kanilang magiging negotiating team na nakatuon sa pagbabalik ng seguridad at pangmatagalang kapayapaan sa kanilang rehiyon. Dagdag ni Rubio, handa na ang Ukraine na tumigil ng makipagdigma at magsimulang makipagnegosasyon sa Russia at kung tanggihan man ito ng Moscow ay magiging klaro sa lahat kung sino ang nagiging hadlang sa pagwawakas ng naturang gyera.
Today we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation. And hopefully we'll take this offer now to the Russians. And we hope that they'll say yes to peace. The ball is now in their court. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
Nakatakdang bumisita sa Russia si Special Envoy Steve Witkoff sa Russia sa mga paparating na araw upang kausapin ang kampo ni Vladimir Putin ukol sa naging usapin sa Saudi Arabia. Wala pang nilabas na komento ang Kremlin ukol sa naganap na dialogo sa pagitan ng Estados Unidos at Kiev.
Sisimulan na pong muli ng Estados Unidos ang pagbibigay ng tulong pang-seguridad sa Ukraine. Matapos itong magsabi na handa na itong sumailalim sa isang 30-day ceasefire kasama ang Russia. Nangyari ang paghinto ng military aid sa Ukraine bilang tugon sa pananaw ni Trump sa inasal ni Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky sa kanilang naging pagpupulong sa Oval Office na nauwi sa mainit na sagutan. Ngayon naman ay iniutos ni US Secretary of State Marco Rubio ang pagpapatuloy ng pagbibigay ng US ng military aid at intelligence sharing sa Ukraine para ipakita kay Zelensky ang bagong commitment ng kanyang bansa sa mga negosasyon para wakasan na ang giyera sa Ukraine. Nagpasalamat naman si Zelensky sa naturang suporta ng Estados Unidos at sinabi nitong handa siyang makipagtulungan sa lahat ng kampo upang isulong ang naturang peace deal. Sa ngayon ay wala pang ibinibigay na detalye ang magkaparehong kampo ng Ukraine at Estados Unidos ukol sa estado ng kanilang minerals deal matapos matanggal ang usaping ito sa kanilang joint statement. Sinabi naman ni Ukrainian Chief of Staff Andriy Yermak na mapag-uusapan sa ibang pagpupulong ang eksaktong kondisyon ng kanilang kasunduan sa Estados Unidos.
We discussed the frames, we discussed the principles in which can be possible to build the future. Some agreements, some the negotiations position of Ukraine. And of course, it's the position of, first of all, it's important to achieve a just and lasting peace. And this is not the place to discuss some very concrete details, because our goal today was, first of all, to discuss the first steps about the possible truce ceasefire. And we discussed about some questions of our bilateral relations. We discussed about the situation in front line. And of course, will be some time when we will be negotiate exactly about, because a lot of details, as I said.
Libo-libong mga Meksikano ang nagrally sa plaza ng Mexico City kasama si Pangulong Claudia Sheinbaum upang ipagdiwang ang desisyon ng Estados Unidos na ipagpaliban ang pagpataw ng taripa sa Mexico. Habang hawak ng mga ito ang malalaking mga watawat ng Mexico at sabay-sabay na sumisigaw na igalang ang Mexico habang pinapalakpakan si Mexican President Sheinbaum. Ang naturang rally ay naganap ilang araw matapos ipahayag ni US President Donald Trump ang isang buwang pagpapaliban matapos ipataw nito ang karagdagang 25% na taripa sa lahat ng import products ng Mexico. Bagamat nagplano si Sheinbaum na mga hakbang na maaaring labanan ang banta ng taripa, subalit pinili niya na magsagawa ng isang malawakang rally. Una narito, sinabi ng mga analistang patuloy na banta ang posibilidad ng pagpapataw ng taripa sa Mexico na makakaapekto sa mga gustong mamuhunan sa bansa at maaaring magdulot ng pagbaba ng gross domestic product ng bansa ng higit sa 1%.
Nosotros no somos extremistas, pero tenemos muy claro que hay principios irrenunciables. No podemos ceder en nuestra soberanía, ni puede resultar afectado nuestro pueblo por decisiones que tomen gobiernos o hegemonías extranjeras. En ese caso, siempre actuaremos de inmediato. La historia común de nuestros países está marcada por numerosos episodios de hostilidad, pero también por numerosos episodios de cooperación y entendimiento.
Sinabi ni US President Donald Trump na napakataas ng taripang ipinapataw ng Canada sa mga produktong dairy at lumber. Tatapatan kaya ni Trump ang ginawang aksyon na ito ng Canada. Mula sa Washington, narito si NET25 correspondent Jeff Sanidad para sa mga detalye.
Dahil raw sa napakataas na taripa ng Canada sa dairy at lumber products, sinabi ni Pangulong Donald Trump na tatapatan niya ito ng kawangis na taripa sa mga produktong Canadian. Ayon kay Trump, sinisingil ng Canada ang US ng 250% tariffs sa mga produktong tulad ng itlog, gatas, keso. Gayon din ang mga produktong kahoy.
Because Canada has been ripping us off for years on tariffs for lumber and for dairy products. 250%, nobody ever talks about that. 250% tariff, which is taking advantage of our farmers, so that's not going to happen anymore. They'll be met with the exact same tariff unless they drop it.
Dahil dyan, sinabi ni Trump na sisimulan agad-agad ang ganting taripang ito laban sa Canada upang matigil na ang hindi patas na kalakalan.
But that's what we're going to do. We're going to charge the same thing. It's not fair. Never has been fair. And they've treated our farmers badly. Look, our country's been ripped off by everybody. That stops now. I had it stopped in my first term. And we're going to really stop it now because this has been very unfair.
Binanggit din ng Pangulo ang plano nitong dagdag taripa sa India. Subalit nakipagkasunduan niya ang bansa na babaan ang tariff rates nito. Bukod sa India, pinasaringan din ni Trump ang China at ang European Union. Subalit sinabi nitong wawakasan niya ang anyay pananamantalang ito ng ibang bansa sa US.
India charges us massive tariffs, massive. You can't even sell anything into India. It's almost restrictive. It is restrictive. You know, we do very little business inside. They've agreed, by the way, they want to cut their tariffs way down now because somebody's finally exposing them for what they've done. And same thing with China, same thing with a lot of other countries. And the EU has been a terrible abuser of this country. I mean, the EU was formulated in order to take advantage of the United States, and they have taken it, but they're not taking advantage when I'm in charge. So,
Jeff Sanidad, Washington, D.C. para sa Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Bilang bahagi ng aksyon ng Estados Unidos laban sa anti-Israel activists, isa pang Palestinian graduate student na sangkot sa pro-Palestinian protests sa Columbia University ang inaresto ng immigration agents. Yolanda Aspiras po para sa balita.
Si Mahmoud Khalil ang isang estudyante sa Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs. Ayon sa Student Workers of Columbia Labor Union, Sabado ng gabi nang arestuhin si Khalil ng U.S. Department of Homeland Security agents sa tinitirhan nito sa campus. Ang asawa ni Khalil na U.S. citizen ay 8 buwang buntis. Ayon sa union, si Khalil ay may U.S. Permanent Residency Green Card. Kinundina ng civil rights groups ang pagkakaaresto kay Khalil bilang pag-atake sa protektadong pahayag politikal. Ilang oras bago arestuhin si Khalil, sinabi nito sa isang panayam na nag-aalala ito na tila tinatarget siya ng pamahalaan dahil sa pagsasalita sa media. Noong second-year graduate student pa lamang ito sa Columbia University na sinasabing ang kilusan nila ay malawak at marami silang paraan upang maiparinig ang kanilang tinig.
Once again, our movement here, when they tried to clear it last week, we prevailed. If they want to once again bring NYPD or any law enforcement, we will prevail. Our movement is not only this encampment, it was not that encampment. Our movement is very, very large, and we will have our own ways in order to make sure that our voices are heard.
Noong linggo, isinyer ni U.S. State Secretary Marco Rubio sa social media ang isang report ukol sa pagkakaarestado ni Khalil. Anya babawiin ng administrasyon ang mga visa at green cards ng mga sumusuporta sa Hamas sa Amerika upang maipadeport ang mga ito. Yolanda Aspiras para sa Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Ang Estados Unidos pa rin po ang nangungunang arms exporter sa buong mundo. Ayon po yan sa pananaliksik na ginawa ng Stockholm International Peace Research Institute o SIPRI. Batay sa datos ng SIPRI, sa pagitan ng mga taong 2020 hanggang 2024, tumaas ang 43% ang bahagi ng Estados Unidos sa total global arms export. Samantalang noong mga taong 2015 hanggang 2019 ay nasa 35% lamang ito. 4 na beses ding mas mataas ang arms export ng US kaysa sa France. At kung pagsasamahin ang arms export share ng mga bansang nasa ikalawa hanggang ika-9 na pwesto, ay halos kapantay ito ng Estados Unidos. Ipinakita rin ng SIPRI na ang nakaraang 5 taon, nakapagbigay ang US ng armas sa mahigit 100 bansa at rehiyon. Ang Estados Unidos din ang pinakamalaking supplier ng armas ng Ukraine na siyang dahilan kung bakit naging #1 arms importer ang Kyiv. 45% ng mga armas ng Ukraine ay nanggagaling nila sa US magmula pa noong taong 2015 hanggang 2019. Ayon din sa ulat ng SIPRI, bigo ang mga miyembro ng North Atlantic Treaty Organization o NATO sa Europa na makamit ang defense autonomy. Ito ay sa kabila ng mga hakbang na ginagawa ng mga European states ng NATO na mabawasan ang pagiging dependent nito sa pag-aangkat ng mga armas at pagpapalakas ng sarili nitong arms industry.
Libo-libong tao ang sumali sa isang Stand Up for Science rally sa Washington, D.C. sa New York. Inirereklamo ng grupo ang pagbabawas at tigil pondo ng administrasyon ni Pangulong Donald Trump. Hindi rin nagustuhan ng mga nagpoprotesta ang ginawang pagsisante ng administrasyon sa mga empleyado ng ilang U.S. scientific departments. Mula sa Washington, D.C., narito ang report ni NET25 correspondent Rosel Feria.
Ang mga pagpoprotesta ay tinawag na Stand Up for Science. Ginanap ito dito sa Washington, D.C. sa kalapit estado na New York at sa California. Libo-libo ang sumali sa mga demonstrasyon laban sa pagputol o paghinto ng mga pondo at pagsibak sa mga nagtatrabaho sa iba't ibang departamentong siyentipiko ng Trump administration. Nanawagan para sa aksyon si Dr. Phil Plait, na isang astronomer at science communicator.
While these fights continue, we've made a lot of progress. And, we made a lot of progress, but only when we take action. Action in the courts, action in the streets, actions online.
Kabilang sa mga nirereklamo ng mga demonstrador ay ang pagkalas ng US mula sa Climate Damage Fund ng United Nations. Ang pondong ito ay para tulungang makaagapay sa mga nakapipinsalang climate change fuel disasters ang mga mahihirap at mahihinang bansa. Nagbabala si Dr. Gretchen Goldman ng Union of Concerned Scientists saan niya'y masamang maidudulot ng kawalan ng mga taong nagmamasid sa klima.
When there's no one to keep our food, air, and water quality safe and clean, real people will get sick. When there's no one watching and alerting us to hurricanes, wildfires, and other extreme weather and climate impacts, people will die.
Mula noong Enero, itinigil ni Trump ang pagsali ng US scientists sa pangmundong pagsusuri ng klima. Gayun din ang pagputol ng pondo sa pagbabawas ng paggamit ng coal at pag-atras sa climate agreement. Ayon sa isang doktor na si Ben Hayes, laban sila sa paghinto ng pondo para sa siyensya.
We're really opposed to the defunding of our science institutions. We both work as physicians, and when we don't have really good science, our patients suffer. We also feel like our daughters suffer. We need science for them to grow healthy and strong.
Ayon sa congressional sources, higit sa 800 empleyado na ang sinibak din ng National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration o NOAA mula noong 27 ng Pebrero. Ang NOAA ang ahensya na naghahatid ng weather forecast sa US. Ayon din sa ilang sources, may mga empleyado rin ng National Institute of Food and Agriculture o NIH at ng Economic Research Service ang sinisante. Ayon sa mga demonstrador, walang magandang maidudulot ang paghinto ng pondo para sa saliksik, lalo na para sa ikaliligtas ng buhay laban sa sakit.
There's so much amazing research out there that's trying to increase access to much life-saving care, and I'm really, really concerned that the funding cuts, the chilling effect that it's having on researchers and physicians is really going to rip our access away, and it's going to have tremendously negative consequences for our community.
I think most Americans agree science is super important. Clinical trials, I do research on the brain, Alzheimer's research. All these things are going to stop if funding isn't continued in science. The U.S. leads the world. Why stop that?
Tuligsa ng mga siyentipiko, hindi nauunawaan ng mga tao tulad ni Elon Musk ang kahalagahan ng siyensya.
I think people like Elon Musk don't understand that all the basic medicines that they are benefiting from, everyday life, science that they're benefiting from would be really hampered if NIH funding is cut. And we want medicine to be better, we want science to continue to contribute, and that is going to require NIH funding to not be cut.
As of February 22 ngayong taon, may 30,000 na federal workers na ang sinisante ng Administrasyong Trump gamit ang Department of Government Efficiency ni Elon Musk. Rosel Feria para sa Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Samantala, inamin ni US President Donald Trump na mas mahirap pakitunguhan ang Ukraine kaysa sa Russia. Alamin po natin ang mga detalye mula kay NET25 correspondent NJ de Guzman mula sa Washington, D.C.
Sa White House, ikinumpara ni Pangulong Donald Trump ang Ukraine at Russia. Anya, tila mas madaling pakitunguhan ang Russia kaysa Ukraine. Ito ay sa gitna ng pagsisikap ng kanyang administrasyon na makabuo ng peace agreement sa pagitan ng dalawang naglalabang bansa.
I think we're doing very well with Russia. But right now they're bombing the hell out of Ukraine, and I'm finding it more difficult, frankly, to deal with Ukraine. And they don't have the cards. They don't have the cards. As you know, we're meeting in Saudi Arabia on sometime next week early. And we're talking, I find that in terms of getting a final settlement, it may be easier dealing with Russia, which is surprising because they have all the cards. I mean, they're bombing the hell out of them right now. And I put a statement in, a very strong statement. Can't do that, can't do that.
Umaga ng Biyernes, nagbabala si Trump na maaari nitong patawan ng malawakang US sanctions ang Russia. Ito ay ilang araw matapos ihinto ng US ang tulong militar sa Ukraine pati na ang intelligence sharing dito. Nanawagan si Trump sa dalawang bansa na pag-usapan na ang peace deal sa lalong madaling panahon, lalo na't daan-daang sundalo ang nasasawi kada linggo dahil sa labanan.
I think both parties want to settle. I think if I wasn't president, this war would have had no chance of settlement, zero chance. But I think we're going to get it settled and stopped. We got to stop. They're losing on average 2,000 soldiers a week. That's a lot of soldiers. Do you agree, Peter?
Ang banta ni Trump na banking curbs at taripa laban sa Moscow ay matapos maiulat noong Lunes na naghahanda ang White House na patawan ng sanctions ang Russia bilang tulak na wakasan na nito ang gera. NJ de Guzman, Washington DC para sa mata ng Agila International, Trusted, Connected, On Point.
Susunod, US naglalayong gumawa ng state-of-the-art air traffic control system.
Controversial live streamer na haharap sa 5 taong pagkakakulong sa South Korea.
At Donald Trump, ginawa nga bang Tesla showroom ang White House? Mga detalye po na mga balitang yan at iba pang mga balita sa pagbabalik ng Mata ng Agila International.
Matatag ang paninindigan. Matapang sa pagresponde. Matapat sa paglilingkod. Patikang tagapagbalita. Mata natin sa balitaan. Alex Santos kasama gabi-gabi sa Mata ng Agila Primetime.
Ang mga maiinit na balita at rumaratsyad ang usapan ng bayan, ihahatid namin sa 100%! 100% ang pagbabalita! 100% talakayan! Lunes hanggang Biyernes! Alas 5 hanggang alas 7 ng umaga! Live na live sa Radyo Agila 1062 Mega Manila! At sa NET25! 100%!
Sa NET25, let's get together. Sa NET25.
25 tanong mula Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao. Tanong ng ordinaryong Pilipino, hindi ng mga eksperto. Isa-isang sasagutin ng mga tatakbo sa Senado, punto por punto. Isang kandidato, 25 tanong ng bayan. A senatorial point of view. Dito sa NET25.
Isang 4 anyos na batang babae ang nailigtas ng mga bumbero sa China matapos po itong ma-stranded sa window ledge ng labas ng kanilang apartment. Ayon sa lokal na ulat, lumabas ang batang babae mula sa bintana ng kanilang tirahan na nasa 14th floor ng building. Pinaniniwala ang hindi na kayang makabalik ng bata patungo sa kanilang tirahan dahil natakot na ito sa paglalakad sa makitid na dinaraanan nito. May mga tao na rin na nasa baba ang naglatag ng tela para sakaling mahulog ang bata ay masasalo nila ito. Buti na lamang ay mabilis ang pagresponde ng mga bumbero sa pagsaklolo sa bata. Matapos ang rescue ay dinala ang bata sa fire station upang suriin ang mental health nito.
Hinila pataas ng lubid ang isang babae sa Brazil matapos sumakay ng elevator.
Nakaligtas ang isang lalaki sa Russia matapos makaladkad ng umaandar na tren. Makikita po sa CCTV footage ang isang lalaking nakaupo sa isang bench. Makaraang dumaan ang tren sa Kurskaya Railway Station ay naglakad lamang ito papalapit sa umaandar na tren. Dito na nakulog ang paa ng lalaki sa awang ng platform at dahil po sa bilis ng tren ay nakalagkad ito pailalim. Ayon sa lokal na ulat, pinaniniwala ang nakainom ang lalaki. Kaagad namang naisugod ang biktima sa intensive care unit ng isang ospital.
Ibinida ng Transportation Secretary ng Estados Unidos na gagawa ito na isang sistema ng pagkontrol ng trapiko sa ere na kaiinggitan daw ng buong mundo. Ang hakbang na ito ay ilang linggo matapos ang mid-air collision sa Washington, D.C. na ikinamatay ng 67 katao. Alamin natin kung anong air traffic system ang balak na ipatupad sa Estados Unidos mula kay Jonah Malari.
Noong Martes, sinabi ni Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy na gagawa ito ng pinakabagong air traffic control system na kaiinggitan ng mundo.
Again, we're thinking, 3.5, 4 years we can get this completed. A brand new air traffic control system, gold-plated, envy of the world. And so what we're looking at doing is they're not simple. This is high-tech stuff, but we are going to move from copper wires, we're going to go to fiber, wireless, and satellite, right? A combination of those three in our system. We have radar. Again, it works, but this is from the 1970s or early 80s is the newest radar that we use.
Ayon kay Duffy, lumang-luma na kasi ang air traffic control system ng bansa.
Because there's been a number of air incidents that have taken place over the first several weeks since I came into this department. And there's no unique, they're all unique. There's no common theme to the crashes that have taken place. But I think what it's done for us is made us focus on our air traffic control system. And when we take a look at that system, no doubt it is antiquated, it's old, it's anywhere from 25 to 30 years old. You've heard me say it 1,000 times. We're using floppy disks in our system. We have headphone jacks that we're plugging and unplugging. This is, think back to the 1980s. If you were even alive, that's the system that we're using for air traffic control.
Dagdag ni Duffy, magpapatupad ng permanenteng tuntunin ang ahensya upang pigilan ang helicopters na lumipad malapit sa Washington Reagan National Airport, kung saan may dalawang hindi gaanong ginagamit na runways na operational. Anya, ang pagtatama, pag-aayos at pagpapaganda ng sistema ay upang wala ng mga pamilya ang magdanas ng trahedyang naganap sa bansa kamakailan.
I think we can honor those who lost their lives by paying this forward and saying, you know what, we're going to make sure we've learned from this air disaster. And we're going to pay it forward so there's not other families that have to go through the pain and anguish of losing a loved one like these families had to go through. And I think that's how we honor them. That's how we pay it forward. And we do it by fixing the system and making it better and making it work. So,
Jonah Malari para sa mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Isang container ang sinalpok, ang isang oil tanker naman na may kargang U.S. military jet fuel sa North Sea. Batay sa tracking data ng mga barko, naganap ang insidente malapit sa baybayin ng England. Pinaniniwala ang may kargang higit sa 10,000 tonelada ng jet fuel ang oil tanker. Makikita rin po sa video ang makapal na usok mula sa nasusunog na barko. Iniulat naman ng mga local officials na nakapagtala sila ng 32 casualties mula sa nasabing kolisyon.
Nakaharap sa 5 taong pagkakabilanggo si Ramzi Khalid Ismail o mas kilala bilang Johnny Somali sa mga kasong may kinalaman sa kanyang panggugulo at pambabastos sa South Korea. Pinatawan siya ng travel ban noong nakaraang taon matapos manggulo sa isang convenience store kung saan nakipagtalo siya sa isang empleyado at nagbigay pa ng sexist remarks. Kilala si Somali sa mga controversial stunts, kabilang ang pagsayaw malapit sa isang monumento para sa mga comfort women o biktima ng sexual slavery noong panahon ng giyera. Sa ilang okasyon na rin ay nabalot ito sa kontrobersiya para sa kanyang pagsigaw ng Hiroshima at Nagasaki sa kanyang live stream na ginawa sa Japan kung saan pinagbawalan na siyang makapasok muli sa bansa. Matapos umani ng matinding batikos, humingi siya ng paumanhin ngunit marami ang nagdududa sa sinseridad ng kanyang paghingi ng tawad. Ayon sa Yonhap News Agency, dumating si Somali 1 oras na late sa pagdinig dahil umano sa pananakit ng tiyan. Pinatatanggal din sa kanyang Make America Great Again hat dahil bawal magsuot nito sa korte. Sa buong pagdinig, sinagot niya ang mga tanong ng nakapasok ang kamay sa bulsa at may hindi magandang asal. Nakatakdang susunod niyang pagdinig sa April 9. Ayon naman kay Profesor Aseo Kyong-dok ng Seongshina Women's University, dapat patawan si Somali ng mabigat na parusa bilang babala sa iba ukol sa pagrerespeto sa kultura ng ibang bansa. Anya, umaasa siyang magkakaroon ng makatarungang hatol upang maiwasan ang mga ganitong insidente sa hinaharap. Dahil sa kanyang mga ikinilos, 3 beses nang inatake si Johnny Somali sa South Korea, kabilang ang isang insidente kung saan siya ay sinaktan ng isang dating miyembro ng Korean Navy.
Nagbigay na suporta si President Trump kay Elon Musk sa isang event na ini-livestream sa X kung saan pinuri niya ang mga sasakyan ng Tesla at inanunsyo pang bibili siya ng isa. Nagdala ang Tesla ng 5 sasakyan sa South Lawn ng White House matapos ipahayag ni Trump ang kanyang planong bumili ng sasakyan bilang pagsuporta kay Musk at sa bumababang estado ng kumpanya. Pinuri ni Trump ang mga sasakyan lalo na ang disenyo ng Cybertruck. Bagamat dating kritiko ng dikuryente sasakyan, sinabi niyang marami siyang narinig na magagandang bagay ukol sa Tesla. Umupo siya sa driver's seat ng isang sedan kasama si Musk at sinabing bibili siya ng isa. Hindi siya nag-test drive, subalit sinabi niyang maaari niyang gawin ito sa ibang pagkakataon. Bihira pong mag-endorso ng produkto ang matataas na opisyal ng gobyerno, lalo na ang isang pangulo, dahil sa mga ethical code ng mga public officials sa Estados Unidos. Sinigurado ni Trump na magiging sentro ng atensyon ang kanyang pagbili ng Tesla sa harap ng mga kamera. Ini-livestream ito sa X ng White House official na si Don Scavino. Hindi kaagad tumugon ang White House sa mga tanong tungkol sa ethics ng kaganapan. Sinabi ni Trump na babayaran niya ang sasakyan gamit ang kanyang tseke. Binatikos ang pangyayari lalo na ni Senador Chris Murphy ng Connecticut na nagsabing kahit lantaran, katiwalian pa rin umano ito kasabay ng isang video ni Trump na sumasakay sa Tesla. Samantala, patuloy na bumababa ang stocks ng Tesla dahil sa backlash laban kay Musk, lalo na sa kanyang suporta sa far-right parties kasama na ang AfD ng Germany. Naging target din ng protesta ang paninira sa Tesla. At narito po kami para maghatid ng balita saan mang dako ng mundo. Magandang gabi po. Ako po muli si Ricky Matay.
Ako si Nina Richie Alago Flores. Ito ang Mata ng Agila International. Para po sa iba pang mga balitang nangyari rin sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo, punta tayo kay Alma Angeles para sa Mata ng Agila World News. Take it away, Alma.
Thank you, Nina and Ricky. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News on tonight's headlines. And in a dramatic turn of events, Vice President Sara Duterte has flown to the Netherlands to support her father, former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte, who was arrested and transported to The Hague on Tuesday.
Meron na pong arrangements kasi kailangan ko pausapin yung mga abogado. Doon kung saan man siya dalhin, punta kami, ako, at pupunta yung mga abogado and doon kami mag-uusap po.
Ukraine says it will accept a U.S. proposal for a 30-day ceasefire in its war with Russia. In response, the U.S. has agreed to resume military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine.
And our hope is that the Russians will say yes, that they will also agree, so the shooting will stop, the killing will stop.
And the news starts now. And in a dramatic turn of events, Vice President Sara Duterte has flown to the Netherlands to support her father, former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte, who was arrested and transported to The Hague on Tuesday.
Meron na pong arrangements kasi kailangan ko pausapin yung mga abogado. doon kung saan man siya dalhin. Punta kami, ako, at pupunta yung mga abogado and doon kami mag-uusap kung ano yung mga dako. Nakalagay sa rules ng ICC, the defendant should be taken to a court, a local court. Dapat dinala siya sa korte. At yung proseso natin dito sa loob, yun yung masusunod para sa pagkakitan ng one more year that they are doing it right now. There's no talking to the president. Because it's very easy for him to say, do not turn him over to the ICC. You can detain him here, wherever.
The ICC has been probing these alleged extrajudicial killings since 2018, despite the Philippines withdrawing from the ICC in 2019.
So yes, there is a very clear document that will explain that will explain the basis on how we conducted this arrest of former President Duterte. We comply with our commitments to Interpol.
Sara Duterte boarded a morning flight to Amsterdam, aiming to coordinate her father's legal defense. Her team has not disclosed how long she plans to stay in the Netherlands. Meanwhile, Duterte's lawyers are preparing to meet and explore all possible legal remedies, including determining where he will be held and seeking access to him. Duterte's youngest daughter, Veronica, filed a habeas corpus petition with the Philippine Supreme Court to demand her father's return.
Itong ginawa ng gobyerno, sasabihin niya, wala na, umalis na, wala na kayong jurisdiction. Hindi po pwede, alam nyo. The illegal act follows the actor. Kung yan ginawa mo, you start an illegal act from the very start. Lahat ng ginawa mo ay magiging illegal, gaya ng ginawa nila. Kasi sila ang lumabag ng batas. Kinuha nila pwersahan ang presidente. Isinakay nila sa eroplano laban sa kanyang kalooban. Dinala nila sa isang bansa. So yung illegal na kanilang ginawa, sinusundan yan. Madali sabi, ang gobyerno ay meron pa rin kasalanan. Kahit saan ka magpunta, you are still bound by your illegal acts and you have to be accountable to this country, specifically sa Korte Suprema, sapagkat yan ang mandato niya ang magbigay ng desisyon sa anumang paglabag sa saligang batas.
Yung TRO, moten academic na yan kasi nandun na, lumilipad na siya papuntang Netherlands. Hindi natin alam kung ang Supreme Court desisyonan pa nila yan o hindi na. Kasi nga naman, wala nang jurisdiction ng Supreme Court yan. Nandun na sa ICC ang jurisdiction. So hindi naman pwedeng utusan ng Supreme Court yung ICC.
As the first Asian former head of state potentially facing trial at the ICC, Duterte's case marks a significant moment in international justice. The ICC maintains jurisdiction over crimes committed before the Philippines withdrew from the court, setting the stage for a historical trial.
This is the first case, I think, that is going to deal with a situation that is not from sort of war or election-related violence. This is basically about extrajudicial killings within the so-called drug war. So it's basically about a president ordering its forces to sort of clean up the streets from alleged narco-traffickers, which led to thousands of civilian deaths. So I think it's also in that sense special, and of course it's the first case that relates to Asia that is leading to a trial. So in many ways it's really a first. Well, I assume there's going to be legal challenges about him being transferred because of course the Philippines left the ICC, I think in 2019. So I can imagine that's going to be the first sort of the first hurdle, but then it's going to be months and months of pre-trial, sort of processes. So I don't imagine that we're going to see a trial actually start before probably something like next year.
Meanwhile, China says it's keeping a close eye on the situation after the Philippines arrested former President Rodrigo Duterte on an international criminal court warrant. During a briefing, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning reiterated Beijing's stance at the ICC that the ICC should act cautiously and avoid politicization. Take a look.
This is an important incident. China has noted the relevant news and is closely following the development of the situation. I would like to reiterate that China has always advocated that the International Criminal Court should strictly abide by the principle of complementary jurisdiction, exercise its powers prudently in accordance with the law, and avoid politicization and double standards.
Ukraine says it will accept a U.S. proposal for a 30-day ceasefire in its war with Russia. In response, the U.S. has agreed to resume military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine. And U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. will now take the offer to Russia, adding the ball is in Moscow's court. Thomas I. Likeness for more.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other top American officials met Tuesday in Saudi Arabia with a delegation from Ukraine led by President Volodymyr Zelensky's Chief of Staff, Andriy Yermak. Rubio says more than 8 hours of talks led to an agreement.
We made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation.
As well as the ceasefire, Washington and Kyiv agreed to complete a deal for developing Ukraine's critical mineral resources. Rubio says the next step is to get Russia to buy into the truce.
And our hope is that the Russians will say yes, that they will also agree, so the shooting will stop, the killing will stop, the dying will stop, and the talks can begin about how to end this war permanently in a way that's acceptable and enduring for both sides.
But getting the Russians on board may not be easy. Russian President Vladimir Putin and his diplomats have repeatedly stated they're against a ceasefire. They say they want a deal that safeguards Russia's long-term security. And Putin has ruled out territorial concessions, demanding that Ukraine fully withdraw from 4 Ukrainian regions claimed and partly controlled by Russia. Zelensky, who did not take part in the talks, says the ceasefire will take effect as soon as Russia agrees.
During today's talks, the American side proposed taking a first step forward, establishing a full ceasefire for 30 days. Not just stopping missiles, drones, and bombs, not just ensuring security in the Black Sea, but implementing a complete ceasefire along the entire front line. Ukraine welcomes this proposal. We see it as a positive proposal and are ready to take this step.
Zelensky's Chief of Staff, Andriy Yermak, says Ukraine is ready to work with Russia to end the war, and Yermak says after 3 years of fighting, Kyiv is committed to peace.
3 years is a long period of time, and for the people in the world, it's necessary once again to understand, not Ukraine started this war, but Ukraine ready for just and lasting peace.
The mood in Europe is optimistic following news that Kyiv is ready to put down arms if Moscow is. In a post on X, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the EU welcomes news of a potential truce. She says the ball is now in Russia's court. NATO chief Mark Rutte says he's hopeful, but he wants to see what comes next.
I would be optimistic, but of course we have to see. I know that, first of all, President Trump, I think, has broken the deadlock, as I said, on the situation now in Ukraine, and I think that is important. And that leadership we needed, and we need going forward. I know that the Ukrainian president is very much committed to peace. So I'm not going to predict the outcome of today. It will be an important step in a somewhat longer process. But I would be cautiously optimistic.
Back in Washington, U.S. President Donald Trump says he hopes this is the first step to ending the war. And he says it's now time for Moscow to make a move.
Now we have to go to Russia and hopefully President Putin will agree to that also. And we can get this show on the road. We can get this horrible war where 2,000-3,000 soldiers a week, every week, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 sometimes. I get the reports. And they're not American soldiers. They're Ukrainian and they're Russian.
Trump says he'll invite Zelensky back to the White House where they can sign the minerals deal.
Is Zelensky invited back to the White House?
Sure, absolutely.
Mr. President.
Thomas I. Likeness, NET25 World News.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has reiterated Moscow's stance on the Ukraine conflict. emphasizing that NATO's expansion was a key factor leading to the crisis. Lavrov stated that had Ukraine not pursued NATO membership, the conflict could have been avoided.
But he doesn't want provide these guarantees, security guarantees to Ukraine under Zelensky. He has his own view of the situation, which he bluntly presents every now and then, that this war should have never started, that the pulling Ukraine into NATO in violation of its constitution and violation of the Declaration of Independence of 1991, on the basis of which we recognized Ukraine as a sovereign state, for several reasons, including that this declaration was saying no NATO, no blocs, neutral status.
Meanwhile, the foreign minister has also made a pointed critique of European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's efforts to boost European defense spending. Lavrov suggests that von der Leyen's push for remilitarization is a strategic attempt to divert attention away from the deeper economic and social challenges facing European nations.
We want a peace through strength. And this is the reason why I present today to the leaders the Rearm Europe plan. The Rearm Europe plan provides up to 800 billion euros for defense investment. It gives the member states fiscal space to invest in defense. It gives the member states possibility to invest in the Ukrainian defense industry or to procure military capabilities that go right away to Ukraine.
Führer Ursula is mobilizing everybody, everybody to remilitarize Europe. Some unbelievable sums of money are being mentioned. And many people think that this is a trick to divert attention of the population from those dozens and hundreds of billions of euros which have been spent during the COVID days and during the assistance to Ukraine without proper auditing. It's a discussion which is being raised.
The U.S. Department of Education is laying off nearly half its workforce, a move seen as the first step toward shutting down the agency entirely.
The U.S. Department of Education said on Tuesday it would lay off nearly half its staff, a possible first step towards a total shutdown.
Nobody shows up to work because...
The move comes as government agencies scramble to meet President Donald Trump's Thursday deadline to submit plans for a second round of mass layoffs. The terminations are part of what the department called in a press release its, quote, final mission, alluding to Trump's vow to eliminate the department.
President Trump understands that we'll be working with Congress.
Asked on Fox News whether the firings would lead to the department's dismantling, Secretary of Education Linda McMahon said yes, adding that doing so, quote, was the president's mandate. The Department of Education oversees $1.6 trillion in college loans, enforces civil rights laws in schools, and provides federal funding for needy districts. The department said affected employees will be placed on administrative leave starting on March 21st. Meanwhile, the union representing more than 2,800 department workers there vowed to fight what it called the draconian cuts. The layoffs are the latest step in Trump's sweeping effort to downsize the government. Led by billionaire Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE has cut more than 100,000 jobs across the 2.3 million-member federal civilian bureaucracy, frozen most foreign aid, and canceled thousands of programs and contracts. Dozens of lawsuits have been filed challenging the legality of those moves, and the blunt force approach has frustrated several White House officials and Republican lawmakers, some of whom have been confronted by angry constituents at town halls.
Now, U.S. President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on steel and aluminum imports took effect today, imposing 25% duties with no exemptions. And within hours, the European Union fired back, announcing $28 billion in reciprocal tariffs set to begin next month. Take a look.
Donald Trump's tariffs on imports of metals took effect Wednesday. They imposed 25% duties on shipments of steel and aluminum, with no countries excepted. The tariffs also hit hundreds of products made from the metals, from nuts and bolts to bulldozer blades and soda cans.
The European Union must act to protect consumers and business. The countermeasures we take today are strong but proportionate. As the United States are applying tariffs worth $28 billion, we are responding with countermeasures worth 26 billion euros. This matches the economic scope of the tariffs of the United States. Our countermeasures will be introduced in 2 steps, starting with April 1st and fully in place as of April 13th. In the meantime, we will always remain open to negotiations. We firmly believe that in a world fraught with geo-economic and political uncertainties, it is not in our common interest to burden our economies with such tariffs.
Within hours, the EU fired back with $28 billion in reciprocal duties. Those tariffs will kick in from the start of next month. Canada is also mulling how to respond to the latest moves. Speaking Tuesday in Houston, Texas, Energy Minister Jonathan Wilkinson said Canada could limit sales of oil to the U.S.
But when we're talking about sort of non-tariff retaliation, it could be about restricting supply. It could be putting our own export duties on products. It could be energy and minerals. It could be broader than that.
Canada is the largest supplier of imported oil to the U.S., shipping some 4 million barrels per day. Wilkinson says a levy on U.S. ethanol is another option being considered. In Australia, the government was disappointed not to win an exemption from the new tariffs, something Trump said last month he would seriously consider. However, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said it would be counterproductive for Australia to respond with tariffs of its own.
Tariffs and escalating trade tensions are a form of economic self-harm and a recipe for slower growth and higher inflation. They are paid by the consumers. This is why Australia will not be imposing reciprocal tariffs on the United States.
Other countries facing a significant hit from the Trump tariffs include Brazil, Mexico and South Korea. However, the new charges have been welcomed by a U.S. Steel Industry Association, which said the measures would supercharge domestic production. Investors are less sure, with U.S. stocks shedding more than $4 trillion in value over recent weeks amid concerns about the trade war.
President Donald Trump defended his tariff policies during a meeting with top U.S. business leaders, dismissing concerns over market volatility and touting the economic benefits of his trade strategy.
Donald Trump has defended his use of tariffs and dismissed concerns about market volatility sparked by the global trade turmoil. Speaking to a gathering of business leaders in Washington on Tuesday, the U.S. president said his trade policy was already showing results.
We have car companies that are not building in Mexico now. They're building in the United States. Some of them, the plants were already started and they stopped construction. And now they're going to build in the United States. It was very unfair that they'd build in Mexico and sell them across the border with no tax, no nothing. They'd take away our jobs. They'd close up places in Michigan and all over the country. And tariffs are, they don't want to pay 25% or whatever it may be. It may go up higher, maybe go up higher.
In the audience were around 100 CEOs, and some of them may be feeling growing unease. They've all seen some $4 trillion wiped off the value of US stocks in recent weeks, amid fears over the impact of the trade war. Businesses have also been concerned by the volatility of the tariffs, which have been variously imposed and delayed, raised and lowered. On Tuesday, there was more of that, with turmoil over duties on Canadian metals. Early in the day, Trump said he would double levies to 50%. He was responding to a move by the Canadian province of Ontario to impose its own tariffs on electricity supplied to America. Hours later, Ontario dropped the move, and Trump said US duties would stick at 25%.
A little while ago, I had an opportunity to speak to Secretary Lutnick. And Secretary Lutnick has sent out an olive branch to us to come down and immediately meet with him, meet with the whole trade administration, and discuss the future. Rather than waiting till April the 2nd, threats going back and forth, tit for tat, I've agreed to suspend temporarily, and we always have that tool in our toolkit, until we sit down over the next day or two. I'll be heading down to Washington along with Dominic LeBlanc, and we'll have a good discussion. There's a point that both parties are heated and the temperature needs to come down. And I thought this was the right decision. They understand how serious we are about the electricity and the tariffs, and rather than going back and forth and having threats to each other, we have both agreed, let cooler heads prevail. We need to sit down and move this forward.
The fresh day of turmoil drove another down day for stocks, outweighing glimmers of hope over a Ukraine ceasefire. More big firms, including retailer Kohl's, also warned that the darkening economic outlook was hitting sales. In the end, the Dow Jones Index closed the day down another 1%. But if that worries Trump, it didn't show on Tuesday.
The tariffs are having a tremendously positive impact. They will have, and they are having.
Trump said his tariffs would generate a lot of money for the US and could be raised even higher in the days ahead.
Look, the higher it goes, the more likely it is they're going to build. And ultimately, the biggest win is not the tariff. That's a big win. That's a lot of money. But the biggest win is if they move into our country and produce jobs. That's a bigger win than the tariffs themselves.
And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back.
Be your own health advocate by turning into your own expert. We are your coach. Without any fiction and with lots of facts. Be active in a clever way. In good shape.
A surfer is feared dead after being attacked by a shark in shallow water on a remote beach in Western Australia. A 37-year-old man from Melbourne had been reported missing after witnesses saw a struggle and heard screams at Wharton Beach, a remote area about 800 kilometers from the state capital Perth. Jenna Despy reports.
Authorities recovered a surfboard with bite marks from the beach. Police believe the man died during the attack over the noon hour. Western Australia Police Commissioner Colonel Blanche says drone footage shot by a witness captured the shark swimming away from a large cloud of blood close to the shore. Officials called off a search for the man's body on Tuesday. They do not expect him to be found. Local media say the man had been vacationing with his girlfriend when the attack took place. They had been planning to meet his family in Western Australia later in the week. The man's suspected death would be the fourth fatal shark attack in the area since 2017. Two of the deaths are suspected to have been caused by the great white sharks, which can grow up to 6 meters in length. Jen Despy, Perth, Australia, for NET25 World News.
An Australian man has made medical history by becoming the first person in the world to leave the hospital with a total artificial heart implant. Take a look.
Oh, this is the big one. You know, this is quite incredible. This is a device that's been in the making for 20 years, as you've heard earlier. It's an incredibly novel device and ingenious, really, the way it works. And it works. And so to finally get this device to help some of our sick patients has been, you know, enormously gratifying. Yeah, well, you're sort of lost in the moment, I guess, and There's a lot going on, but it's an incredibly easy device. You stitch those to the atria, as I said, and then you literally click the pump in, and then hand off this drive line, and turn it on. So that's a sort of, you know, a moment where everyone holds their breath, but it turns on and it works. And then you slowly wean the patient off the heart-lung machine, which is keeping them alive while you do the surgery, and the pump takes over, and it did. Well, the older technology is clunky. It's bigger than this, and it has a lot of moving parts in it, in particular valves that have to open and close. So whenever the blood interacts with components like that, there's risk for failure. This literally has one moving part in it, as you saw earlier, a spinning rotor. One side of it pumps to the lungs, the other side pumps to the body.
Yeah, so he had the device for 104 days before his transplant, so 3.5 months, and he was discharged from hospital along that way. And so that was, you know, a world first for us. I mean, ultimately, that's what our goal is, to return these patients back to a normal quality of life. And he did return to a normal quality of life outside of the hospital. So, you know, this gives us an incredible hope that in the future, we won't need to bring him back in for a transplant, that they can just stay out, keep the device, you know, for the rest of their life.
And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you all for joining us. Good night.